whenever you're ready.
Prosecution, you can start.
May it please the court, Your Honor, the counsel, our honorable guests, and you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I am the prosecution attorney on the ICC accusation of Theophilus Shepstone of the crime against humanity of forcible deportation or transfer of population. Sir Theophilus Shepstone, a Britishman, serving as Secretary of Native Affairs to NATO in Cape Town Colony, modern-day South Africa, wielded the control that the position of this power had allowed him to. The entirety of the Cape Townian colony and the indigenous territory within it fell under the grasp of his administration, under his rule for the next 40 or so years until his retirement in 1879. In that day and age, with the colonizers that held those Eurocentric beliefs, Shepstone included, terrible atrocities against the natives have been committed. The land, once rightfully owned by the natives, had been taken away from them by innumerable unfair conflicts and treaties, now having to support a burgeoning white population. And Shepstone, instead of giving the consideration and attention of their administration on the welfare of the natives as their imperative moral responsibility, favored the whites. Not only this, Shepstone allowed and even encouraged acts of violence against the natives. And in one notable instance, the Langla Bailey affair, an unfair court ruling that had deported the Chief Langla Bailey to Robben Island. Thus, he should be charged the crime against humanity of deportation or forcible transfer of population. You will see in the trial that Shepstone rigged a coronation of Cetewayo simply to attempt to expand his personal control over Zululand. You will learn how Shepstone authorized violence against the Amapuli, even against the earnest advice of his closest friend, Bishop Colenso, to simply take territory away from them. You will learn how he cunningly arranged an annexation of Transvaal to increase his personal control over the Boer territory and Zululand for natural resources. And you will learn how he betrayed the trust with the Zulu chiefs to declare war on them, precipitating the Anglo-Zulu conflict that led to the collapse of the Zulu Empire. For this, for the systemized African reserves that encouraged segregation, for the delegation of land away from natives towards whites, and for violence he perpetrated to slowly gain control over natives and therefore native territory, I will prove to you today, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Shepstone should be charged with the crime against humanity of deportation or forcible transfer of population to finally serve justice. Thank you.
Defense, you can present your opening statement.
Thank you.
May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Claire Chong, and it is my privilege to represent Theophilus Shepstone in this case before you today. And you are here today because Theophilus Shepstone has been wrongly accused of forcibly transferring the African population. Theophilus Shepstone is from Bristol, England. He had a wife, he had 4 children. At the age of 28, Shepstone was appointed diplomatic agent to the native tribes in NATO South Africa. During his tenure, he would advocate peace and justice within the natives whenever conflicts begin. He would take that duty, look at the things that are happening around him, work hard, and establish a better environment for the African natives. He was a responsible official, a leader, a talented missionary, yet today he is mistaken and accused of a crime that he does not deserve. You'll see, I am here today because there are many other aspects that needs to be put into consideration. Motivation, duty, and future considerations. Motivation is the reason for people's actions, desires, and needs. Furthermore, it is an immense element of the crime that Shepstone is charged with today. Later, you will learn that Shepstone was not well received by the tribes, nor was he favorable within the British government. But you will also learn that every action he did, every decision he made, was for the peace, justice, and safety of the African population. Duty is a commitment to perform some action in general or if circumstances are rife. With that in mind, think about what situation Shepstone was under. Shepstone was a part of the government, a part of the community, and therefore it was lawful for him to to carry out his duty and justice of law to punish the natives who deserved it. Now, when you made a decision, did you think for the future or just the present? For Shepstone, you chose the future. Being in charge of a highly populated area, watching the frequent conflict within the unruly natives, that was what Shepstone had put into consideration for his decisions. The idea of doing so lost in popularity and support, but what he lost was in exchange for a more peaceful lifestyle and a better future for the natives. I ask you, use your common sense. Think about what makes a person guilty. Think about what makes a person innocent. Members of the jury, when you put Shepstone's motives, duty, and long-term decisions into consideration, you will realize that the only verdict that speaks the truth and brings justice to the court is the verdict that finds Theophilus Shepstone not guilty. Thank you.
Prosecution, you can present your evidence.
Members of the jury, today I will prove the three elements that prove Theophilus Shepstone's guilt: motivation, content, and context. Contrary to what the defense has stated, Theophilus Shepstone was motivated in bringing unfair rule to the natives. For example, the first piece of evidence. Next. He wanted to increase his personal influence in Zululand, of course, but he also dreamed of tapping the great wealth in minerals and migrant labor within the African interior. Members of the jury, you must realize that Shepstone was fueled by his personal ambition, disregarding the native welfare. Members of the jury, you must realize that tapping the great wealth in minerals and migrant labor within the African interior meant unfair treatment to the natives. Exploitation of minerals was one of the leading causes of forced relocation of the natives. Migrant labor was another cause of forced relocation of the natives to places where minerals were mined. So, I will now explain the context behind the first piece of evidence. The coronation of Shepstone that happened in 1878 was Shepstone's goal to establish his influence in Zulu territory. The definition of coronation is an act or ceremony of crowning a ruler. During the coronation, he negotiated with Shepstone the rightful heir with the Zulu king with military powers. You can see that Shepstone is willing to use violence whenever he wants to establish his influence. This demonstrates Shepstone's able mental alacrity to seize opportunities to maintain or establish his power. It also shows Shepstone's ambition and disregard for native welfare just for the purpose of expanding the British Empire. This is my second piece of evidence. One thing is quite certain, that if we are forced into hostilities, we cannot stop short of breaking down the Zulu power, which after all is a root and real strength of all native difficulties in South Africa. So, this was Shepstone's personal remarks from one of his diaries. This demonstrates his aggressiveness towards expanding control. So first, he establishes influence, and then he expands control, using violence against native tribes to claim their territory. Shepstone expressed his intention of taking control of the Zulu territory, which I will explain later precipitated the Anglo-Zulu conflict. Shepstone's true intentions of committing the crime of forced relocation by violence. This is a crucial point. Shepstone was willing to use violence, willing to cause the deaths of civilian natives just for expanding his personal control over more territory. And finally, it demonstrates the Eurocentric belief that British deserves to be in control. Contrary to what the defense might later claim, the natives were content before the British had even came. Their intrusion onto native territory was an intrusion of their homeland, an intrusion of peace. So, the third piece of evidence. The whole Hubei tribe, it seems to me, must be removed from where it is and dispersed among the farm. This is an excerpt of a letter from Shepstone to Sir Bartle Frere, governor of the Cape. So, that evidence proves proves that Shepstone had wanted to relocate the Huli tribe to be dispersed among the colony just for the purpose of establishing white control. Disseminating the natives among the territory he has control over lessens their cause for conflict and rebellion. This also demonstrates Shepstone's true intentions of committing the crime of forced reclamations by violence, as Shepstone had wanted to use military powers to control the Huli. So now, I'm going to demonstrate the various crimes he committed against the natives, which led to forced displacement and even deportation. So, this is the Langla-Bailey affair, which happened from 1873 to 1876. When he served as Secretary of Native Affairs to NATO in Cape Town Colony, he had discriminated against the natives. At that time in NATO, there was no law forbidding the possession of guns by blacks, and the Huli tribe had accumulated the arsenal of them. The one catch in this, though, was that Shepstone's administration had the blacks register their guns, which actually was an excuse for confiscating them. He wanted to prevent rebellion, as the natives wanted to claim back their original territory. After that, when Shepstone had when Shepstone had wanted to declare violence on the natives after he had forced them to register their guns, this prompted the natives to relocate to another safer territory, which was lawful under NATO law. Because of that, he encouraged violence on the attack of the natives again. He sent one of his generals to ambush the natives and kill over 300 civilian Amahuli by burning them, by massacring them when they were hiding in caves, women, children. So, after this incident, Shepstone had an unlawful court case against Langla-Bailey, who was captured. He was deported to Robben Island, and the land that was confiscated was never returned to the natives, even against the order of the British government. So, evidence number 4. This backs up what I said earlier about there is no law forbidding natives to own guns. In NATO, no law had been passed forbidding blacks to own guns, but they had to register them. They soon learned that registration was an excuse to confiscate guns. The natives needed to have weapons of self-defense, as their territory was taken away from them already. What could they do? The colonists rallied around, solidly in favor of the punitive expedition against Langla-Bailey. This was when Shepstone had ordered generals and also colonists of the Cape to attack the people of the Amahuli who had relocated. His friend, Bishop Colenso, accused Shepstone of a policy of expediency and a sacrifice of honesty. I will tell a story now between Bishop Colenso and Theophilus Shepstone. Bishop Colenso was once a friend of Theophilus Shepstone, but after this incident, Bishop Colenso, after accusing Shepstone, had broke up with him because he didn't agree with Shepstone's behavior. So, this is a map. Langla-Bailey, you can see, relocated along the Bushman River to here, and these are mountains right here, and this is Dunford. Dunford was Shepstone's general that led the attack. They went along the Moore River, the Lautamic River, and ambushed them at the Bushman's River Pass. This caused innumerable casualties. Evidence number 5. In London, the Langla-Bailey trial was regarded as a travesty of justice, whereas Shepstone, unblamed, was knighted in 1876 and became master of the whole position. This is precisely why I'm here today. Shepstone did not receive any blame for the incident, even though he was one of the crucial perpetrators behind it. The confiscated lands and cattle, contrary to the British government's instructions, were never restored to the Amahuli. Evidence number 6. This is a quote from a book. It allowed the interests of the government and the colonists of NATO to triumph over those of the Huli chiefly house and its adherents. The Huli was a prosperous country to be destroyed by Shepstone's actions. Okay, next. So this is Chief Langla-Bailey, which is a victim of Shepstone's actions. Now, I'll talk about the annexation of Transvaal. Transvaal, also called the South African Republic, was once originally an independent state with a demography of the Boers and the Zulus. His plans to start the colonization of the African interior started here, at the Transvaal. He wanted to exploit the natural resources within it, as you can see. There was opposition to the annexation from both groups of people, from both the Boers and the Zulus, which I'll demonstrate later. It was one of the main reasons that precipitated the Anglo-Zulu conflict in 1879. The Zulu kingdom had their land intruded upon by Shepstone's administration, and thus it led to the war. Evidence number 7. Annexation and Shepstone's subsequent role as administrator in the Transvaal, 1877 to 1879, have given rise to considerable controversy. Shepstone was a crafty, secretive South African talleyrand whose soaring ambition led him to employ deceit and intimidation. Relations between the Boers and the British were poisoned for generations. Next slide. So this is a map of the annexation of Transvaal, so you can better know where it is. So this is Cape Colony, and this is Natal. Both were ruled by Shepstone. This is Orange Free State, which was a buffer between the South African Republic and Cape Colony. This was where the Anglo-Zulu War started.
Prosecution.
Okay. Do I get an extra 3 minutes because there's no direct examination of my witness?
Yes, you're right.
Oh, really?
Judge, may I pass out the defense evidence to the jury? The folder.
Oh, I've got that out, okay. I wouldn't do it. Your Honor, so the question, are we gonna have a 7-minute time period here for evidence and then 3-minute questioning, or is it 10 minutes?
10.
Is that correct, Your Honor? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. Today, my job here is to create reasonable doubts. Now, think of reasonable doubt as a chain that is all linked together. It only takes one weak link to establish reasonable doubt. Therefore, if one element of this entire crime is proved false, or a reasonable doubt is true, the entire charge must not stand. Next slide, please. With that in mind, today I will be proving to you the falsity of element 5 in crime against humanity of deportation of forcible transfer of population, and I'll be doing so by looking at this element from the 3 perspectives: motivation, duty, and future considerations. Next slide. Before starting, I'd like to give a brief recap of who Theodore Shepstone is. Theodore Shepstone is a British South African statesman. During his tenure, he was known for maintaining the peace and safety of the Africans, respecting the native cultures, and being a wise decision maker, which I will elaborate on more later. Next. Now, the first perspective to look at this crime is motivation. Motivation is an immense element in each and every crime in an international criminal charge. By proving that Shepstone's motivation is positive and beneficial to the natives, the phrase intended the conduct to be part of a widespread or systematic attack will be false, as shown in the strikeout phrase. Thank you. Could the members of the jury please turn to page 2 and look at the first quote. So first of all, I would like to point out that this quote is from a review of the native policy in NATO from 1845 to 1910. From this quote, you can see Shepstone's effort to preserve land for the Africans, attempt to give right to the native, and Cross confirms that his motivation can only have been a sense of justice. Next. Now, could you please look at page 4 and the first quote. Nothing much was said about Shepstone's childhood background or growing up background. However, this quote states that Shepstone had, quote, grown up at a time when humanism determined the views and actions of missionaries. This quote, again, verifies that his motivation, quote, has been a sense of justice. Next slide. And page 1, the third quote. Page 1, third quote. The next quote I would like to bring up from Britannica says that Shepstone himself has, quote, provoked opposition from white settlers who coveted further African land. This proves Shepstone's opposition towards taking land from natives, and also confirms Shepstone's positive motivations towards Africans. Next slide. In the second quote on page 1, I would also like to point out that the reserves the prosecutor had referred as a place Shepstone hoped to bring the natives to were either missed out or intentionally ignored, that these reserves were for educational and cultural purposes. Members of the jury, Shepstone had the duty of spreading the British culture into Africa. At the same time, he respected the native culture, and therefore there is no reason that bringing different cultures from other countries is the wrong thing to do. Now, next slide. Now, in page 2, second quote, let's look at the historical background of this case. During the scramble of Africa, European countries moved into the African colonies in order to reach the purpose they had in mind. What purpose, you might wonder? From this quote from a research website, you can see that the two motivations of the scramble of Africa was first, cultural extension, and second, industrialization. Members of the jury, the prosecution has charged Shepstone for forcefully transferring the population from one state to another, but how can relocating the African tribes be beneficial for the purpose of the scramble of Africa? Next. This is the map at the left. It's the map of resources in South Africa, and the map at the right is the map of the locations of the tribes that Shepstone had contact with. Next slide. Now this is the merged map of the previous two maps, and that shows the resources and locations of the tribes. Members of the jury, you can clearly see that there were natural resources in the areas of the native tribes. And therefore, the possibility of having the motivation to move the tribes away because of industrialization simply doesn't stand. Next slide. Duty. Okay. Now I would like to focus on Shepstone's duty. From looking in this new perspective, you will learn that the quote, systematic attack towards the population is false. Next slide. In the first quote on the first page, again, I would like to briefly make clear that Shepstone himself has said that his duty lay first in the direction of peace and safety. Next slide. The next excerpt was a local critique. Similar to the previous quote, can again summarize Shepstone's positive impact on British and Africans during his tenure. Next slide. Now, I would like to make a few clarifications on the story of the land liability affair that the prosecutor had brought up. First, this excerpt states that in NATO, no law has been passed forbidding blacks to own guns, but they had to register them. Contrary to what the prosecutor had said, he had said that it was not against the law for liabilities people to have guns and store it illegally. However, the law came before Shepstone came to Africa, so therefore, his pre-rebuttal doesn't stand. Next slide. The story goes on. In response to illegal acts the natives did, Shepstone decided to have a negotiation with the chief liability. However, before he could do that, another government official, Sir Benjamin Pine, had driven away the natives by force without Shepstone's permission. Members of the jury, this is a crime. This is one of the most important things that the prosecution missed or intentionally ignored, that it was not Shepstone who forced liability to leave. Okay, then, surprised by Pine's sudden force, liability, quote, set out with the bulk of people to Basutoland. Next slide, please. To Basutoland, as shown in the map. And again, members of the jury, I would like to give another special emphasis that Langobile had left the land himself due to Pine Southern military activity. Next slide. Members of the jury, again, it is a fact that this is a story that can be told today with absolute certainty. Any other story leaves plenty of room for reasonable doubt. Next slide. Finally, I would like to look at this crime from the perspective of future considerations for the future. This perspective will prove that, quote, new the conduct was part of a systematic attack does not stand, because when you're making decisions for future improvement, popularity and support will not be the priority. Next slide, please. On page 4, the last quote. First on, according to Shepstone, the tribes, quote, lived so close together that tribal change of resistance was difficult. Members of the jury, I ask you to use your common sense. With at least 50 separate clans with about 100,000 members in NATO during the pre-Shaken times, how likely is conflicts between the different tribes to happen because of lack of resources? Often. And therefore, considering this point, I firmly believe that Shepstone has done the right thing to move part of the population to a less populated area in order to maintain peace in the NATO. Next slide. In the second quote on page 4. Lastly, I would like to point out that Shepstone's idea of another educational reservation, quote, was not well received. Never far from his thoughts was to improve the economy of NATO. Sorry. Members of the jury, decisions are never able to satisfy everyone here. Furthermore, it was a decision for the future welfare, and of course, the people who simply doesn't see that far would not support the idea due to financial reasons. Shepstone had the idea of bringing part of the population to a less populated area, and it was for a benefit for a present future. Can you say that he's idealistic? Probably. Ambitious? Yes. Thinking for a future? Yes. Had a good motivation? Definitely yes. Next slide. Can I go back? With these evidences in mind, I would like you, members of the jury, to carefully examine the evidence during the review, and I'm confident you will come with a solution that Theophilus Shepstone is not guilty because element 5 of the crime simply does not stand. And because that this element of the crime is false, the entire charge is broken like a chain. Members of the jury, today I seek an acquittal of all charges. This concludes the defense evidence. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience.
Defense witness, please come up.
Oh.
Prosecution, you can start your cross-examination.
The defense does not seem to be ready. Please state your full name for the record. Please state your full name for the record.
My name is Theophilus Shepstone.
What was the government's position in South Africa at the time of the coronation of Szechuan?
From 1845 to 1853, I was the diplomatic agent to native tribes in South Africa. From 1853 to 1875, I was the secretary for native affairs.
What was the reason for attending the coronation of Szechuan?
Of course, the coronation of the Szechuan was from a tribe. And because I was in charge of the tribe, I, of course, have the duty to go to the coronation of Szechuan.
Do you agree that you sent military powers to the coronation of Szechuan in order to establish influence there?
No, I do not.
Then that contradicts an evidence from your source.
Why?
Okay. Do you remember recalling using the source South African history website?
Yes, I believe my lawyer, Claire Chung, has.
Then do you remember in the passage in that source that Shepstone has sent military and has sent over 40,000 soldiers over there during the coronation in order to establish influence with Szechuayo, the chief, or do you not remember?
Yes, I do remember me sending them. And the reason of that was because I wanted to show that I have the capability of being in charge of that place.
So you had wanted to be in charge of that place.
Of course I want. I want to establish peace and safety for the African population.
Do you recognize that they were already peaceful before you came?
No, they're not peaceful before I came. As my lawyer Claire Chung has stated, the geography of Natal had attracted many tribes to be there, so it was highly populated, therefore causing conflict between the native tribes for natural resources.
What was the reason for prosecuting the Amapu?
Oh, because before I came, the law of having to register for guns was established. So when I saw them illegally having weapons hidden in their place, of course I have to execute the duty.
Do you agree that then registering the guns is actually an excuse for confiscating them? Do you agree with that?
Not necessarily.
Please explain.
Can you repeat your question?
Can you please explain from one of your own sources that confiscating the guns was actually an excuse, registering the guns was actually an excuse for confiscation?
Okay, if you put your point of view inside the governor, of course you don't want rebellion within the tribes because you want peace and safety in the tribes.
Do you agree that Angela Bailey was allowed to leave into lawfully?
He left himself.
Yeah, he led 10,000 Amapubi.
Yeah.
Do you agree that he was leaving lawfully?
I don't care because they left themselves. It was their decision, and also furthermore, it was Sir Benjamin Pike who led the army to force them away.
Time.
Thank you.
Prosecution, please present your closing statement.
May it please the court, Your Honor, the counsel, our honorable guests, and you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. From the evidence I've provided in this trial, I've proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Theophilus Shepstone is guilty of the crime against humanity of deportation or forcible transfer of population, contrary to whatever the defense has claimed. From his motives, I have demonstrated that Theophilus Shepstone had intended the consequences of his actions to be against the native population, of their forced relocation, such as during the Langla Bailey affair and during the Anglo-Zulu War. Like the big picture of the puzzle, I've delineated in detail about Shepstone's actions in relation to this charge. Furthermore, during this trial, the defense has repeatedly failed to look at the other pieces of evidence I have provided. Instead, she tries to, for a metaphor, tries to pick out puzzle pieces to suit her own interpretation, or pretending to ignore the rest like they weren't there. Jury, you may remember in the Langla Bailey affair when she claimed that gun ownership by the Amapubi was illegal. While our own source stated that Shepstone had discriminated against the Amapubi. She had also failed to explain to satisfaction the other pieces of evidence she ignored, such as how the massacres of civilian indigenous could possibly be justified. Finally, she tries to tie together disparate pieces of evidence of Shepstone's role without any provision of the context of the evidence from the sources she provided in an attempt to explain how his role was good, while ignoring the most visible and glaring pieces of evidence about the atrocities I have provided. Jury, I implore you to see the complete picture. Though I concede that valid points were made about how other people abetted the crimes Shepstone had committed, such as Sir Benjamin Pike. Jury, you must realize that Shepstone was a man behind many of the actions, After Sir Benjamin Pine had led the atrocities, Shepstone could have just ignored the conflict, but instead he sent a delegation to attack them, thus unnecessarily perpetrating the conflict. Only he has the mental alacrity to satisfy his overly ambitious dreams of conquering the African interior. Outwards from Cape Colony to the colony of Natal to what was before indigenous territory, to something that the defense has ignored. You remember that the defense had shown a map where natural resources were not in the area of the Zulu. I agree, but the defense ignored that the Zulu was part of the land where natural resources were found, and the defense failed to mention that. For ruling 40 years, Shepstone had to disregard for native welfare had ruled South Africa. The consequences of his rule, no matter what the jury may claim otherwise, include prejudiced systems for natives that last even till today, as well as a complete stall in native economic development.
Time is up. Defense, please present your closing statement.
May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. It is terribly difficult to build through life without encountering opposition. I have encountered opposition, and I'm sure many of you have encountered opposition. And if you haven't, you know someone who has met someone who has disagreed with them. Maybe a family member, maybe a friend. And if not, you know about celebrities, former presidents, who face opposition from the public. But the beautiful thing about humanity and the beautiful thing about this world is that what other people think about you does not define who you are. And that is why I'm here today. Theophilus Shepstone was a British South African statesman during the 19th century in charge of Natal South Africa. Today, the facts and evidence have shown that Shepstone's motivation, duty, and considerations for the welfare of the future is what shapes his innocence today. Members of the jury, please be aware that the prosecution had his script written before the trial, and therefore those false and offensive statements about my evidence do not conclude and connect with what I have showed you today. Members of the jury, you have learned that the prosecution chose to ignore the weapons that were illegally hidden by the African natives without registering them. You have learned that the prosecution chose to ignore the fact that the research were for educational purposes. And you have also learned that the prosecution chose to overlook the evidence that it was not Shepstone but Sir Benjamin Pine who led the army to force Chico Mbele and his tribe to leave the land. And you have learned that the prosecution chose to twist the story of Shepstone's response to those illegal acts into a willingness to use force. Ladies and gentlemen, judge and jury, I hope you seriously take into consideration the positive motivation of Shepstone, the duty of Shepstone, and the future considerations from Theophilus Shepstone. You are the wise judges of this court today, not me. You sat here during the trial, you saw the evidence in the documents, watched the cross-examination, and now you have to go back and make a decision. I submit to you today that the information the prosecution has does not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Theophilus Shepstone is guilty of the crime that he has been charged today. The reason why your job is important today is because every person deserves to be in a fair trial. So members of the jury, think about the statements that the prosecution made. Think about the words of the defendants. Think about the statements that I made. But I am confident at the end of this day, at the end of this trial, the only one conclusion I can make is that Theophilus Shepstone is not guilty. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience.
That's it. Okay, so you're gonna basically collect the evidence and that's it for the day. And then jury, we're gonna kick you out because the jury from yesterday's gonna come in and they're gonna announce the verdict. All right, Rebecca, is that still on? Did you turn it off?